Hello, everybody, and today I want to talk a little bit about how to learn new drum beats, or to sort of teach yourself new drum beats if you know how the beat or whatever it is you're trying to do is already played, you just can't play it. And I'll give you an example of this. I was listening to Donald Fagen's solo album, Morph the Cat, and listening to the track, I think it's called What I Do. And the drums are mainly on the ride cymbal for the most part. But it sounded like in the background there was like a shaker track. And after listening to it some more, I realized it wasn't a shaker track. It was actually the drummer working the hi-hat on the and counts, on the upbeat, like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. And so he was doing this throughout most of the song, and I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, I've never done that before. How in the world is that accomplished? Well, it's just a matter of coordination and muscle memory. So ordinarily, when you do a beat on the ride cymbal, you do it and you work the hi-hat on counts just 2 and 4. So that's how most drummers do it. However, a more advanced technique is to do what was being done on that track and do the hi-hat on the and counts. So like this. Now, of course, this requires a lot of coordination with your feet because your hi-hat is doing something that's a little bit unnatural and very much different than what your right foot is doing, and it's very different from what your left hand is doing. A lot of times when younger players who haven't played very much or inexperienced players play, their hand and the corresponding foot want to do sometimes the same thing. So you have to develop this independence. And the way to do it, with all things new on the drum set, is to do it very slowly, unreasonably slow. I see a lot of people try to do things fast for the first time, and it just never ends up working. So I'll go over how I figured this out. And granted, for a more experienced player, it may be more easy to learn just because of more experience on the instrument, more intuition. But even a fairly new player can learn to do this if you started off slow. So I'm going to have to leave my vocal mic on while I do this, so there may be some bleed through. So the first thing is you have to know what's going on. Okay, so you know that the drummer is doing this beat because you can hear it. And I'm leaving out the hi-hat right now. So we know the drummers do that. We also know that the drummer is doing this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. We can do that separately, but putting it together is kind of a whole new deal. So this is where counting sort of comes into play. And we want to use the counts 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and as we go through each measure. And we want to do it really slow, as if, we've never done this before. So we know we have to break it down a little bit. We're doing this with straight eighth notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and on the ride cymbal. What we'll do is we'll go ahead and add the hi-hat to that. So we know we're going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So we can do that. And then what you do is you need to figure out where the snare drum and the bass drum fit into all that. You're doing the bass drum on at least counts 1 and 3. So we'll start with that, making the beat a little bit simpler. And we also know that we're doing the snare drum on counts 2 and 4. We'll leave ghost notes out for now. This is just the basic building blocks of it. So we need to count all of that out and get our hands and our feet to do the right thing on the right count. And in order to do that, we've got to do it very slow. So let's try it unreasonably slow, about like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 And now I've seen a lot of people who try to do this for the first time, they end up wanting to go back to the bass drum after they hit the snare drum. When you're doing it this slow, it seems like an eternity between bass drum hits, so you have to be aware of that. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, or you could think of it as bass, snare, hat, snare, snare, hat, bass, hat, snare, hat, bass, hat, snare, hat. I think I counted it wrong the first time. I'm not used to counting it like that, but that's an alternative method. You know, just whether or not you find that easier, I don't know. That's up to you. So once that becomes to feel natural, it's just like playing catch. You know, you throw the ball softly at first, nice and slow, to give your time, or to give your eyes and hands time to coordinate and get in the right position. And then after you do it more often, you can throw the ball faster. Same thing with the drums. You can do it faster, the more natural it becomes to do it at the slow tempo. So, and it may take many minutes or however long it takes of doing it at a particular tempo before you can move on to the next. It just depends on your experience level, really. And then once you get more natural with that, then you can add the other bass drum hits. And then once that becomes more natural over time, it's just a matter of experience and using the beat when you can, and working on it. Then you can add the ghost notes, and I use very soft ghost notes, as some of you have already seen in some of the videos. So that's basically how I figured out that beat. Do it slow and work up to it. Now, it was I was playing gigs at the time almost every weekend, and it was a while before I was able to actually implement it into songs regularly. It was kind of touch and go at first because, again, it's something, doing it by yourself is one thing, and then playing it with the band is kind of different because there's other stuff going on, and your brain sort of reacts differently. So that's something to keep in mind. Another good example of this is the famous Bernard Purdie halftime shuffle, which I learned similarly. So, and again, this is one of those beats where you have to know how it's done before you can attempt to do it yourself. So, real quick, I'll just kind of explain how it's done. This may be too quick for some people to understand, but actually showing this beat really isn't the point of the video, but it's kind of it's a shuffle beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and you notice there's a rest in between each set of triplets. Well, that rest is actually a ghost note on the snare drum. That's the basis of how this groove kind of goes. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1 and 2 and 1 and 2, 1 and 2 and 1. So that's kind of how that goes. Now, when I first started learning this beat, that's what I had to sort of realize in the first place. It's like, okay, well, he's doing this. And that's the basis of what's going on. Then we're going to go ahead, and because it's a halftime shuffle, we're going to play, make sure my mic, okay. We're going to play the snare drum on count 3 if we're going to use a 4 beats in each bar. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. So you notice that on count 3, the hi-hat and the snare drum hit at the same time, and then right after the snare drum count 3, you have to do a ghost note. but you sort of you omit the ghost note before it. Actually, there is no ghost note before it. I'm thinking of a different beat. Sorry. So I had to do that over and over again just to get the feel of that. Then it's time to add the bass drum. Okay, so I go back and I'm still playing it slowly, and I think, how can I make this, simple just to start out with? I'm just going to play the bass drum on count 1. So 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2, 3 and a 4. So I did that over and over again until it became natural. It took a little longer for that to be natural. I was younger at the time and hadn't played as much. And then once I got used to that, then I started adding a 1 on the bass drum. A 1. So I would play that just to start it off. I'd play the pickup into count 1. A 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and 4 and a 1, 2, 3, 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3, 4 and a 1. Now, also a little thing I'm adding in here is emphasis on the beat on the hi-hat, which is another a little bit more of an advanced technique while you're doing everything else. But in fact, when I started using the beat, I don't think I was doing that. That's just sort of something that evolves over time. Okay, so then once you get used to that, add in more with the bass drum. A 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 1 and 3, 4, then 1 but up Really, I think the third thing that I added was probably 1, 2 and a 3, a 1, 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1, 2 and a 3, 4 and a 1 and 2 and a 3. Then once that became more natural, then I began to speed it up. So this is a beat made famous by songs like Home at Last and Babylon Sisters by Steely Dan. Also, Jeff Porcaro used it on the Toto track Rosanna, except he did it a lot faster, kind of like... except that's not the beat. He changed the bass drum around a little bit. So, I mean, but either way, it's pretty much the same thing. So that's how you learn how to do new things on the drum set. Always start it off very slow, and then make it, and do it until it feels natural. Then you can begin to speed it up. If you start speeding it up too fast, you're going to find that all you do is make mistakes on that. So, as with all things on drums, start slow. See you next time.